Yes, indeed, my son will graduate tomorrow. Third in his class. Wow.
Nice, sir. Nice.
Nice. Pretty excited. Pretty excited.
Mother must be proud.
Yes, indeed. Congratulations.
It's 6 o'clock, so that's
Recording.
Record, yes. Come on. Everything is being recorded over.
Yeah, don't say anything you don't want
Too late.
our 116 viewers.
Go them.
All right.
Go them.
I can guarantee you, my wife.
He's over tonight. He's over. Right, Al?
It's over.
He's over tonight.
Y'all are so disrespectful.
They
Disrespectful.
weren't far enough.
This is why we play the game, sir.
Well, yeah. I guarantee you he's over tonight. Oh, yeah. I
He's so
guarantee he's over.
disrespectful. Oh, you take the easy way out.
I guarantee you. I think it's not easy when you guarantee something.
The fourth one is the hardest one, sir. You know that better than
It's
anyone.
gonna be a blowout.
Oh, now it's a blowout.
Watch.
Wow. The disrespect.
No, dude, I give them props because they shouldn't even be there.
The
I don't know how they beat Boston. Boston was too much talented.
The disrespect.
But they're not gonna.
Pretty soon they will not be the big news in sports.
Nah, I think the Browns going somewhere else. They're gonna get a lot of money somewhere else.
There's another person coming to know him who dwarfs them all.
Miami?
Lionel Messi.
Oh, yeah.
100 times as big.
Yeah, he's gonna have a rude awakening playing in front of
Yeah,
12,000
yeah,
people.
exactly.
They'll
Yeah,
put him in Hard Rock.
he's usually 80,000 people. But he also like sometimes 5,000. Where am I? Am I practicing or playing?
Listen, you don't care. As long as the check's clear. As long as the check's clear, he doesn't care.
Oh, yeah. Messi's man. He got his money ready.
Turned down $1 billion. I'm excited. Turned down $1 billion.
Who?
1.5.
Next time somebody turns down $1 billion, they need to call.
Who's that? Messi? Why? He didn't want to play where?
Saudi Arabia.
Oh, well, who was the one that got kicked out? Was it him?
Sit down there.
And for a country, or he said something?
Oh, no. Not Saudi Arabia.
There was a team that, it was a comment. Yeah, I think it was him. I think it was Messi.
Yeah, four half. There comes a point where you don't really notice it. You're missing.
I think it was him. I think it was Messi, dude.
Yeah.
Isn't him and the other guys that play against him together in the team, right? From France.
Kylian Mbappe.
Yeah, when they don't they play together?
They
Professional?
until recently.
That's why they broke up because he hit something Messi did or something. I read some news, you know. Yeah.
Really
Soccer, soccer's not like basketball. Soccer, you know, you can be a bigger ego. Basketball is
Well, Mr. Gorman is here, so that means we can
good.
at least get started. Do you
Yes,
have your?
sir.
We'll get started.
You get my eyes on?
And drink.
What's up?
We all drop stuff here.
Let's get it on.
Hey.
Pretty much.
I'm gonna do some
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the June meeting of the Finance Committee of the Board of Aldermen. I'll begin by reading the notice. Aldermanic Notice, New Haven. The Finance Committee will hold a public hearing on Monday, June 12, 2023, 6 o'clock p.m. in the Aldermanic Chambers, 165 Church Street, New Haven, to hear the following. 1. LM 2023-0356. Order of the New Haven Board of Alders authorizing the mayor, budget director, or comptroller to enter into a one-year commercial lease agreement and execute any amendments that may arise with Gateway Partners, LLC, for the City of New Haven Health Department offices and public health clinic in the amount not to exceed $242,844, and for a period of July 1st, 2023 to December 31st, 2023. 2, LM 2023-0355. Order authorizing the mayor, budget director, or comptroller to enter into a one-year contract with RSM US LLP with 3 renewable option years to perform an independent audit of the city's financial statements as required by federal, state, and local law for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2023, and renewable option for each of the fiscal years ending June 30th, 2024, June 30th, 2025, and June 30th, 2026. In conjunction with the recommendation by the Financial Review and Audit Commission to the Board of Alders pursuant to the city charter. Number 3, LM 2023-0360. Order of the Board of Alders authorizing the mayor to enter into a 3-year lease agreement with New England Golf Carts, DBA, Yamaha Motor Finance Corporation, Incorporated, for 75 used golf carts and related service. Number 4, LM 2023-0369. Excuse me. Order of the New Haven Board of Alders authorizing the City of New Haven, Mayor, Budget Director, or Comptroller, and New Haven Board of Education to enter into a 1-year contract with First Student in the amount of $30,730,883.40 for regular and special education in town and out of town busing for fiscal year 2023-2024. Number 5, LM 2023-0329. Order to read and file the updated budgetary and financial reports for the month of March 2023 in compliance with Article 8, Section 5 of the Charter. Number 6, LM 2023-0366. Order to read and file the updated budgetary and financial reports for the month of April 2023 in compliance with Article 8, Section 5 of the Charter. These items are filed with the city clerk and may be inspected at room 202, 200 Orange Street, New Haven. Per order, the Honorable Adam Marchand, Chair, attest Michael Smart, City Clerk. If you need a disability-related accommodation, please call 3 business days in advance at 946-76501 voice or 946-8582 TTY. Public comment and testimony may also be submitted via email to publictestimony@newhavenct.gov before 2 p.m. on the day of the meeting. We will now proceed with introductions of members of the committee, starting to my right.
Thank you. Ernie Santiago, Ward 15.
Adam Marchand, Ward 25.
Frank Douglas, Ward 2. Captain Singh, Ward 5.
Okay, well, we're going to proceed according to the agenda. So I see the maker for item number 1 is here. I would invite her forward as well as Mr. Gormany. I'll just note for the record that we do not yet have a quorum. However, we do have a mechanism for dealing with these items. It may be what we do is leave them in committee so that I can ask the full board to discharge them in our first meeting in July, which would be the most rapid way to deal with these items in any case. So in that scenario, not having a quorum is not a problem. This subset of the Finance Committee is more than capable of having a workshop, and we certainly invite our city staff to proceed as they normally would. And so I see that there's paper that we're going to make sure we all have. And once that's done, names and addresses for the record, please.
Michael Gormany, City Acting Controller, 45 Jefferson Road, Brantford, Connecticut.
Marissa Bond, 54 Meadow Street, New Haven, Connecticut.
All right, thank you for hearing this matter. This matter is the lease between the City of New Haven and Gateway Partners 54 Meadow Street, which currently houses the New Haven Health Department on the first floor and, thank you, ninth floor of the building. The handout is really the letter that was submitted in the overall packet. So you should have received this before, but I just wanted to hand this out as it gives the financial information that we are looking to negotiate with Gateway Partners. We are looking at a 6-month lease for the health department, and in negotiating with the vendor, they are actually leaving the terms and conditions the same from this year going into next year. So the overall question is, why 6 months? If anyone remembers, we purchased 424 Chapel Street approximately a year and a half ago, which is going to house a few city departments, including the health department. In working with our city engineer, we are actually on a timeline for the health department to begin to move into that building in November, in the beginning of November. Looking at the, working with the city engineer, myself, Maritza, and the mayor's office have met to make sure that we will continue that timeline throughout this year. So that is primarily the reason why we have a 6-month lease. And looking at, just to give an overview of the moving, we're looking at basically moving the offices and the clinic. The clinic is the hardest piece to move. You know, the offices are really just bringing the computer equipment, files, things like that, which we're looking to do an RFP for a moving company to perform those services. But the clinic is what would take the most time, as well as making sure Gateway is also cleaned out and doing the walkthrough with the vendor as well. So again, meeting with Ms. Bond and our city engineer, we are currently on target to complete this task. I know prior we were on target hopefully for the beginning of this fiscal year, but supply chain issues, there were a few contract issues with the vendor internally that we had to work out as well that did delay the project, delay the move a couple of months and begin construction on 424 Chapel. But with all of that out the way, you know, I met with the city engineer last week, so to make sure that this testimony was still good. We are still on target again to begin moving in beginning of November with the health department. Now, nothing's, you know, ever certain. So the money is budgeted within finance for 6 months. We did commit to the vendor to continue to have conversations just in case something does happen and let's say we need another month or 2 months, which we would negotiate with the vendor. If we needed to do a transfer, we come back before this committee fairly quickly to accomplish that. But again, right now we're on target to move in and have that completed by December 31st for the health department. One thing I did forget to mention is to make sure that we do execute this lease in a timely fashion. Mr. Chair, we are asking that it be discharged. The submission had to come after the fiscal year 24 budget was approved, but the lease would be effective July 1st, which is the period that we're looking at. Maritza, I don't know if you have anything else to add?
I don't have anything else to add. I'll just open it up for any questions.
Thank you for that succinct presentation. And it's true, we did have this in our packets, but it's good to have it at the top of the pile. I will now ask colleagues if they have questions on this item. Alder Douglas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So who owns the building on Chapel Street?
We do.
We do.
And who owns the 54 Middle Street?
So 54 Meadow is a combination of ownership. The Board of Ed does own some of the condo space in that building, and then Gateway Partners, which are the floors that the health department leases, they own the remaining portion of the building.
Who is Gateway?
Gateway Partners is the real estate vendor, the holdings of the building. So they're the owners. That's the name of the Gateway Partners LLC.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Douglas. Further questions from colleagues? Alder Singh.
Thank you. Director Bond, I know moving is not easy, but I'm looking in terms of the technical part of it for data cabling, etc. It's, everything run by computer these days. Do you have a vendor who would be assisting in all those technical upgrade and so forth? And where are you with that now?
Yeah, so there's been a lot of planning that has gone into this process. So initially we met with the architect to make sure that the design was going to be able to accommodate the employees. We met to also discuss sort of like this tier process with the clinic versus office space that Michael mentioned. And of course, the digitizing records is another effort that we've been working on for the last 3.5 years. And certainly also collaborating with the IT department to assist with all the technology needs that we require in order to be able to do that. And so our vision is to be able to move all of the offices and then transition the clinic slowly so that we can try to avoid any disruption with operations.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Singh. Further questions from colleagues? Alder Santiago.
Yes, let me see if I can. So when would the 6 months starts? Now in June?
6 months would be July. So July
July
1st
to
until
December.
December 31st.
So then you're gonna start moving on November. You
That's
can
the goal.
start earlier, that way you will pass the December deadline?
So there's still some renovations that are going on in the building that engineer Zinn projects out could be 3.5 to 4 months, which is really why we're saying November. Now, obviously, if he's
Yeah.
done sooner, we will be more than happy to move in sooner.
So listening to that, it might be, there's a chance that you guys will come back for a few extra months, maybe.
We're hoping not,
Yeah,
but according to Mr. Zinn's timeline, we shouldn't have to, but again, you never know what happens, right? So,
Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Santiago. I'll just add, I see in your letter that if it goes longer, the city will negotiate further time with the Gateway Partners. Is there anything in the current setup that would guarantee continuation of the same rates if there was a need to go another 3 months or 6 months, or would that be back on the table as a subject of bargaining?
Yeah, that was brought up as we were negotiating with the landlord, Gateway Partners. So again, they were very amenable to the 6 month period, but they really did want to take a look at it if we went beyond 6 months, just because our timeline has changed over time. So they couldn't guarantee that if we went from January to March, that it would be at the same rate, but they have been great partners in working with us. And as you can see, kept the rate the same going in here. So that would certainly be a point of negotiation that we'd have to look at.
So that provides some additional incentive to try to stay on target with the dates.
Correct.
Okay. This is for you, Director Bond. Do you anticipate any disruption to clinical services during the move from one location to the other?
We're hoping not. As you know, because we are moving locations, we have to get a new clinic license. And so that inspection process is under the purview of the Department of Public Health at the state. And so what we are hoping is that during the month of December, it typically tends to slow down. And so we're hoping that as part of the move, we're going to move one clinic space officially within the November date so that we can get an early inspection and then avoid any disruption of operations. But hoping that, we can't anticipate when DPH gives us a date, but that is sort of the plan, is we're sort of trying to move at least one sample clinic room in to get us the license and then move the rest of the equipment.
Thank you for that. Is it possible, let's just imagine, for example, that everything goes great, except for the regulatory agency is slow getting around to inspect. And so is it possible that we would be able to keep a lease month by month for the first floor, but not for the upper floor?
That's something that I think we'd have to take a look at with the vendor. I mean, with full transparency, that was something we asked last time to try to get it up and going. And I think they really wanted to look at really having all the space utilized instead of just the first floor clinic. I mean, my gut feeling is if we're making a good faith effort in moving everything out, he may be amenable to possibly keeping the clinic on the first floor, but there hasn't really been any further discussions on what happens if the clinic can't move, so can't really give a full answer on that.
How long have we had this space? And in other words, how long have we had this relationship with Gateway Partners?
It's been a while. I can get you the exact timeline. I know it's definitely been over 10 years.
I don't need the exact time frame. I'm just trying to understand, when you're thinking about different contingencies, are we working with someone who worked with us before? They are.
Absolutely. They've been a long-standing partner. Again, the Board of Ed has also leased space from them for a while, even though they own some space. There's still been some lease space that the Board of Ed has done. I remember the health department there for years, so they've definitely been a vendor we've worked with for a while.
Any further questions, Alder Douglas?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, with this move, are we gonna be saving any money since we own the property?
Yeah, so the lease is currently budgeted in the finance department. So when you look at this document here, you can see that, the fiscal year 2023 number, which is the year coming to an end this June, was $394,000. The lease went down to $242,000. So that's, from a leasing standpoint, that's what we would save. Now, of course, you also have to look at the utilities, right, that we'd be paying at 424 Chapel and kind of offset that with this savings, because we're not paying utilities at Gateway, right? We're paying a lease that includes hard and soft operating costs plus the square footage that we're utilizing. But there will definitely be some savings going into the following year.
Second question, now who else will be occupying the space at the new spot? Is there another department?
Yeah, I believe Parks and Public Works, the maintenance section. I'm not sure if there are going to be some Board of Education offices possibly, but there's definitely, I know Parks and Public Works is the garage, and maintenance will definitely be at that space as well.
Yeah, I've taken a tour of the building, and the parking is adequate, and the space, the garage is also.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Douglas. Further questions from colleagues? Seeing none, let me ask if there's a member of the public who wishes to testify on this item. Is there a member of the public who wishes to testify on this item? And for a third time, is there someone here from the public who wishes to testify on this item? Seeing none, we're going to move on to item number 2. Thank you very much, Director Bob, for making this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 2 is a contract with RSM, our auditors, and I believe, Mr. Gormany, this one is yours.
Yes, it is. Michael Gormley, City Acting Controller, 45 Jefferson Road, Ranford.
This is a nice color version of the document we have in our packet.
Correct.
Thank you.
So what you have before you, and before I get started, again, this is an item that would be effective July 1st to begin the audit for the fiscal year 2023. To be honest, this was supposed to be submitted at the last month, but actually just slipped through my fingers here. So we are asking that if possible to be discharged with this particular item due to the timing of the submission. But what you have before you is, per the city charter, we have to go out to review the audit services that the city has. And remember, this is the independent audit that is done on the city. So an independent audit firm comes in and they basically test the city to make sure that we're in compliance with federal, state, and local guidelines. They review the city books. They make sure that everything is on the up and up. And it truly is independent because, believe it or not, the audit firm does not report to the controller or the budget director. And it's supposed to be independent from the city. It actually reports to the chair of finance, and it also works with FRAC as well. When we do an engagement letter, there has to be 3 signatures on the letter for them to do the work: the chair of finance, the controller, and the mayor. So we are actually in the last year of the current agreement with RSM, which has been the last 4 years. They've actually been our auditors for the last 8 years. So what we did was we did an RFP process to solicit audit firms, and we received 2 proposals back, which are outlined in the letter. We received RSM, and then we received another firm called Clifton Larson Allen LLP. The finance department's audit team reviewed both firms based on their proposal and their pricing and other areas of the RFP. Both firms were actually very close. I think the city would be lucky in having either firm. But after we reviewed everything with the criteria, which included experience, costs, and reviewing other proposals that both firms have done, the audit team felt that sticking with RSM was the better solution. And again, this was not an easy decision. It was very, very close with either firm because they are very similar. You know, Clifton Larson, for example, they have Bridgeport and Hartford as their independent auditors. RSM, while not as big in Connecticut, has other municipalities as clients as well. The one thing that really stuck out when we were looking at the 2 proposals was really the number of hours. RSM was really looking at giving the city additional hours beyond what Clifton Larson had proposed within their proposal. And that also dictated the price, which is why you see that RSM is slightly higher in their proposal. But again, that's really due to the number of hours that they're proposing.
As you take that breath,
Absolutely.
acting comptroller, let me just recognize our colleague, Alder Jeanette Morrison, who has joined us. Please continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So when you look at the breakdown, which is really starts on page 2 of the letter that we gave you, that kind of breaks down what I just referred to. The estimated cost, as you see, over a 4-year period between RSM and Clifton Larson is about $258,000 difference. One coming in at 1.9 million, which is RSM, and Clifton Larson coming in at 1.6. But then when you go to the second table, you'll see why. They are giving over 1,500 more hours in their proposal. And I think that's important when we look at the different audit proposals, especially with the federal money that came down, such as ARPA, CARES Act. You know, there's compliance testing that they'll have to do with that. We are getting more grants. They do test the Board of Ed as well. That's part of our city audit scope. So as the Board of Ed gets more federal grants, or ESSER funds, you know, our auditors will test that with the Board of Ed as well. So again, that's really what distinguished the 2 firms from each other, was the number of hours and the detail of the proposal for the use of the number of hours. Again, one area that also was outlined was really the personnel that we would be getting. RSM is providing a greater number of hours for their top level management. Like right now, we do work very closely with the with one of the managing partners at RSM right now. They're always available when we call. So that was also another highlight of the proposal between RSM and Clifton Larson. So again, this is really looking at a one-year contract with options to renew. And the reason we do options to renew with the contracts is it's really at the sole discretion of the city. So if we see something going wrong, you know, we can issue another RFP. You know, we don't have to, or if the chair of finance came and, you know, seeing something and really worked with the administration to say, I think we really need to do another RFP. That's why we leave it at, with options to renew, to give ourselves that discretion to issue another RFP in 1 year, 2 years, whatever the case is.
As you gather your thoughts for the next portion of your presentation, I'd like to recognize our colleague, Alder Richard Furlow, who has joined us. Please continue.
Thank you. So again, just to recap, you know, it was really close with the proposals, but the city audit team, as well as the chair of FRAC, this did go through the chair of FRAC for review as well, and the chair of FRAC, as outlined in the city charter. So the chair, acting chair of FRAC, excuse me, did agree with the city's assessment on staying with RSM as well. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Gormany, for this presentation. We'll now move to questions from colleagues. I'll just remind colleagues that we see representatives from RSM usually once a year, usually in the fall, maybe late fall, and they provide the like their kind of compliance and assessment take on all of our grants. They audit our books whenever we do close out a fiscal year, maybe a year and 3 months after the fact. They're the ones who've looked at that closed out, finally audited budget, and they really tell us about, you know, what is the city meeting the standards of reporting and transparency. They talk about different issues that they point out, major and minor. And so those of us on finance, we've seen these representatives many times before. And the question before us is, should we continue to use the same firm? Questions from colleagues? Alder Santiago.
Good question. Probably more of the clarification. Okay, this is 1 year and there's 3 renewable. Then if we send this favorably to the board, you don't have to come back to us. The city will just approve it, unless you change whoever, you know, we get the contract with. You come with us. If you keep the same people, you don't have to come to us, right?
Correct. If we keep the same audit firm for 4 years, we're basically exercising the options to renew. Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Santiago. I would add perhaps to that answer that if colleagues on the finance committee or the rest of the board have questions or concerns about RSM, they should contact the chair of finance, who has some role to play in looking at the renewal year to year. But thanks for your question, Alder Santiago. Further questions from colleagues about RSM, the inner workings of the contract, more money versus more hours. Looking for questions from colleagues. I have a question. Could you just explain a little bit more the giving some serious weight to more hours from top level management versus a lower base price? Because, I mean, you mentioned that both of these firms have a substantial book of business in the area, so they're proven. But one firm was offering a base price that was $250,000 less. And, you know, $250,000 is a significant amount of money. So just tell us more about why that $250,000 savings was not compelling compared to the other things that RSM offers.
Absolutely. I think that, you know, the $250,000 in additional cost goes into the additional hours that we felt were necessary, especially as we're getting into more compliance with federal grants. There are more questions and things that we have to the auditor, right? So a lot of things that has happened since I took over as acting controller in the last 3 years is I've really engaged my staff to contact, you know, the audit firm with questions, things like that, which is why we've been able to clean up a lot of issues that have happened in the past. So, but again, that requires more hours within the selected company. And a lot of times what we're doing is we are contacting that upper management level. So like the managing partner, actually I had my staff had a phone call today with the managing partner. And again, it's not that the lower level staff doesn't know exactly the different accounting standards or things like that, but a lot of times they have to go to the managing partner for a lot of explanations and decisions. So from the city standpoint, we found it very useful to have that direct connection with the managing partners or the top level staff. So again, the cost is really based on the number of hours, which in the last 3 years as GASB, accounting standards have changed, generally accepted accounting principles have changed. We've needed some of the additional hours with our audit firm. So again, I think, you know, in our opinion, we felt that that was very important, even though, you know, it was $250,000 more in additional cost. Now, obviously, if, you know, they end up using less hours, that's a benefit to us within any fiscal year, right? But the $250,000 did hold a lot of weight because, you know, the additional hours are very important, especially as things change with accounting standards. You know, one of the things that we had to work on this fiscal year for the last fiscal year's audit, which is going to be completed soon, is a change in GASB 87, which changes the way the city reports leases in other areas. That actually required more hours. You know, we had a hold on it from an internal staffing standpoint, but then we figured out with the RSM's help, we had to change a lot of things and actually use a third-party vendor to make sure the city's in compliance with that GASB standard. Again, that was additional hours that we needed. So that's why we kind of weighed that heavily in the two proposals, because again, both firms are great based on you know, reputation and the proposal. So that kind of threw it over the top. That kind of sealed it for us, and us thinking we would need more hours in the coming years with these with the audit firms. So that's kind of how we weighed it out.
Thank you. Alderman Morris.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so just looking at this proposal from the opposite way, if you were to go with the other company who gives you the less hours, I see like the estimated cost per hour, but is there anything, did they write up anything in their contract that spoke to if additional hours are needed? Would these identified costs be the standard cost, or would it be more? Because sometimes companies give this package deal, like if you go with us, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, so the hourly rates listed here, if they needed additional costs, it would be based on the hourly rates that you see page 3. Is that last box where it says rate for additional professional services. So depending on who or which person, like whether it was the manager, the senior accountant, or an associate, those additional hours would be at those hourly rates listed on that page there. So again, if we use the base of 2,700 hours for the entire contract, the pricing would actually be very similar for both firms. So again, based on how it was proposed, that's why it looks like it's $250,000 more. But if we use the base number of hours, pricing would actually be very similar between the two firms.
Yes, thank you, I didn't see that particular box, so it's either 6 in one hand, half a dozen in the other.
Correct.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alderman Morrison. Further questions from colleagues? Alderman Morrison asked one of my questions. The other question I have is, has RSM to date helped the city with its ARPA accounting, or could it in the future help the city with its ARPA accounting?
So RSM has tested ARPA, very small testing in compliance, because fiscal year 22 was really when ARPA really got up and going as far as projects. So there wasn't really a lot of testing to be done in that fiscal year for ARPA. We did consult with them on a few matters, along with our consulting firm. We do have a consulting firm that we did do an RFP for that assists the city in ARPA. But I imagine, especially as some of the projects ramped up in fiscal year 23, they would certainly help us out with more testing and compliance. I think during fiscal year 22, the indication was a lot of audit firms were really grasping ARPA, just like cities and towns were. So if we do have a question, we certainly ask them, whether it's ARPA or anything else related. But my sense is they'll test it more in fiscal year 20 for fiscal year 23, because that's when a lot of our spending ramped up in that fiscal year.
Thank you. Further questions from colleagues on this item? Further questions from colleagues? Seeing none, I'll ask if there are members of the public who would wish to testify on this item. And again, anyone from the public wishing to testify on this item? And for a third time, is there a member of the public wishing to testify on this item? Seeing none, we're going to move on now to item 3 in our agenda, which is about the golf carts.
So, Mr. Chair, if the committee will entertain, Rebecca Bombero is on her way. This is really her item, so I don't know if we can skip over this item for now, or how would you like to proceed?
I think we can probably do that. Mr. Gormany, seeing that the makers for item 4 are here. Well, one of them is here, the other one will be back momentarily. So we'll ask Mr. Lamb to come forward.
All right, thank you.
And we'll come back to the golf carts.
I didn't think so, but
Okay.
Good evening, Mr. Lamb. Your name and address for the record, please.
Thomas Lamb, 9104. Sorry, I'm moving so much. I have 3 different addresses in my head. 9104 Woodside Court Trouble.
The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much. I have a statement that I'll read for the members. So a packet was submitted last week to the members with some information on it. So members of the committee, thank you very much for hearing me this evening. Tonight I have for your consideration 2 extensions for New Haven Public Schools.
So Mr. Lamb, I'm getting feedback that your voice is a little bit too quiet.
Sure.
And so I think,
Let me just pull this up.
let me just speak up a little bit and that will help. Thank you, sir. Sure. And before you proceed, let me just recognize our colleague, President of the Board, Alder Walker Myers, who has joined us.
Thank you very much, sir. Tonight I have for your consideration extensions for 2 New Haven Public School contracts for transportation services with First Student. The current contracts are contract number 21548 New Haven Public School Special Education Out-of-Town Busing, and contract 21547 New Haven Public Schools Regular Education and Special Education Busing. These contracts are set to end on June 30th, 2023. I understand this is a very short timeline. I will take you through the process over the last several months dictating where we are.
And before you do that, please introduce yourself, name and address for the record, please.
Ilya Alexiadis, Assistant Corporation Counsel, 115 Riverview Avenue, Bradford.
Thank you. Please continue.
So, though we are moving forward with contract option year one for each of these, the search for the new contract started in November of 2022 with an RFP posted through the city purchasing to review proposals for a transportation consultant to draft an RFP for a new multi-year contract for transportation services. CESO Transportation Consultants was selected through the RFP process to draft and manage the RFP in an attempt to put forward the best possible transportation contract in RFP services. CESO has had experience in drafting more than over 400 transportation RFPs and over nearly 20 years of collective experience within the group, with contracts ranging in size from 40 buses to more than 600. This contract was awarded through the Board of Education and awarded early January 23. After the approval process with the city purchasing and drafting of services agreement, New Haven Public Schools engaged with CESO and began drafting an RFP for transportation services in February of 2023. The RFP for transportation services was posted with the City of New Haven purchasing in March of 2023. There was a period of proposals review by City of New Haven purchasing, CESO, and New Haven Public School staff. A multidisciplinary team of City of New Haven purchasing, New Haven Public School staff were assembled to review and score the RFP respondents based on RFP scoring criteria and the scoring rubric. A recommendation was formed by the committee and presented to the Board of Education on April 24th, 2023. No decision was reached at this board meeting. A special meeting was held on May 5th, and at this time, the Board of Education vote was not to accept the recommendation of the scoring committee. With no recommendation to move on how to move forward, on May 8th, a special New Haven Public Schools board meeting where the board voted again not to accept the recommendation of the scoring committee and voted to instruct the New Haven Public School staff, i.e. myself and other members of transportation department and school leadership, to negotiate option year one of each of these contracts with the first student. New Haven Public School staff, along with the guidance of Ilya from Corporation Counsel, and engaged with first student to negotiate option year one of each of these contracts to provide transportation for the 23-24 school year. Currently, there are 2 multi-year contracts for these services. The contracts are set to end with final contract on June 30th, 2023. This will be a negotiation of option 1 of the existing contracts, so all contract language of the existing contracts will continue to apply. The option 1 must be mutually agreed upon by both first student and New Haven Public Schools. Contract costs are based on 180 days of service, and pricing provides per vehicle, per type, per day. The total annual cost of each contract is based on the number of routes that are in place at the beginning of each year with enrollment at each school, where students live, and what school they will be attending dictate this number. Currently, the district has 330 routes and buses in service each day across the district existing contracts. The number is only an approximation of the routes and is subject to change throughout the year based upon operations become more efficient, routes are consolidated or split to better serve the needs of the district. First student has given 3 pricing options for the New Haven Public Schools Board of Education to consider. The first, the difference in pricing is driven by the number of replacement buses provided. Currently, first student contracts have approximately 330 buses and vehicles of varying types. The school district does not own our fleet. The fleet is owned and operated by First Student. So First Student retains all of the costs associated with the operation of the fleet. Each year, a number of these vehicles ages out of our fleet based on a 7-year requirement in our existing contract. The 2023-24 year will have a total of approximately 50 vehicles that will age out of our fleet. In an effort to provide options to the district to reduce the cost of the contract, the district could retain all or a portion of these vehicles for the term of the contract year, significantly reducing the cost. Pricing and additional information is outlined in the tables provided. It is the recommendation of the district through our Board of Education to take option 1 of the first proposal as a total approximately $30,730,883.40 at approximately an 8.75% increase from our current contract year pricing. Moving into the RFP and bid process for the next multi-year contract, this provides an opportunity to level the playing field among respondents or bidders at the end of next year, where there will be an additional 60 vehicles that will age out of the First Student fleet that will need to be replaced with new. This will represent approximately 1/3 of the existing fleet. Any new vendor will need to come into New Haven with all new buses unless they have them available to meet the needs of New Haven safety and age requirements. I'll entertain any questions from the group.
Thank you for that presentation. I think you did a great job speaking up. You might even just move that mic back a little bit because it was doing that long. Sorry about that. All right, so just to summarize, there was an RFP process. There's a committee that made a recommendation for a new 3-year contract with First Student, and that was not accepted by the Board of Education.
That is correct.
In 2 votes, it was like the vote did not pass. So then the Board of Ed tasked you and your staff to pursue a 1-year agreement with First Student so that busing could happen in the short term. That is to say, starting in a few weeks and through the fiscal year. And then the Board of Ed's gonna go back to the drawing board in terms of a new RFP process for beyond that.
That is correct. Once the new superintendent begins after July 1st, we'll engage with her on how she would like to proceed with the development of the new RFP, whether that would be an RFP or a bid process, or if it would include a different scope, or however she would like to proceed.
So what's before us this evening is, because we didn't vote on the process that led to a recommendation, that's not even before us. What's before us tonight is the 1-year contract that would start July 1st or very shortly thereafter. There's summer school where kids
July
busing starting early July. And so now we'll have questions from colleagues about the 1-year contract that's before us with First Student to provide busing services, special education and regular busing services for our public school students. Alderman Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Lynn, for your presentation. So just looking at semantics, so if we don't have our meeting until July 5th, and this contract is expected to end before that, is there like an agreement right now with the bus company to give like a 30-day, window? Because you have to go through this process with us, because the reality is, I can't dictate the way that people are gonna vote, but we know we need to get our children to and from their programs for the summer. So is there some type of 30-day window, 60-day window that will allow for this process to go forward, or how does that work?
The First Student has been very good working with me through this process. So that's, we wanted to get through the approval with this body before we address that. it did not seem like it would be an issue, but that's something that we would need to work out with the Corporation Council and with city purchasing to make sure that we're following all of the appropriate protocols.
Okay, so I just, because I'm one of those people, like, it just like buying a house, you don't want to tell everyone I bought a house before signing the contract. And so this kind of feels like that same thing, like, okay, students, we're gonna get you to your summer programs, but we really don't know because we don't have a contract in place. So I'm glad to know that, First Student is willing to work with you, even though they know that the system is looking at possibly another provider. So, okay. So thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Alder Morrison. Further questions from colleagues about this item? Alder Philip.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm a little confused, but let me just ask a couple of questions and I think it will clarify. So we're looking at an 8.75% increase.
Correct.
Over last year.
Correct.
Do we have, so could you explain why there's an increase? What the reason behind the increase?
Well, the increase is there's several reasons for it. The first one is busing prices have increased, maintenance prices for maintaining the buses have increased. We've added additional staff to be able to accommodate an increase in number of calls. So we created a call center for managing how complaints come into the department so we're better able to respond to them. There's also increases in general operating costs. Some of those are also related to union contracts. One of the largest drivers of the increase is an increase to salaries to the more than 200 or 300 bus drivers that we have. Right now, they're in the middle of contract negotiations. They have made a commitment to make a substantial increase to the bus drivers, and that's the majority of the driving force behind the increase.
Thank you. That's very helpful. The call center that's included in this amount that we're voting on, how many people are in that call center?
It's a reallocation of staff that are existing. So we don't need a call center throughout the entire year. Mainly the call center is during summer school startup at the beginning of the school year while we're getting our routes and everything situated to be able to respond to the community better. This was created during COVID, and it was something that I pushed for them to retain. They operate approximately 4 to 5 people that flow in and out of it. We made sure that there was training available for all of their dispatch team to be able to sit in on those calls whenever the need arise. They did add additional dispatchers to that to be able to accommodate. The exact number I don't know off the top of my head.
Is that incurring an additional cost though, since it's a reallocation?
Yes.
It does.
It does, because they added staff. They did add staff. They added additional dispatchers to be able to accommodate.
Now also with the 8.75% increase, are we busing more students?
More students compared to when?
To last year.
We won't know that until after the enrollment period is done. So that'll come in October when we'll know for sure what our enrollments are.
Do you suspect we'll have more students and more routes?
I do not.
We have a lot of students.
Yes.
That don't take the bus because for some reason they're not eligible. And so that's a bit of a concern. Since we're paying $30 million to bus students, and we have students that have to walk home. And I'm talking about like schools like Morrow Sheridan, which is a K through 8, and they're walking home down Whaley Avenue from Morrow Sheridan down to almost where Liquor World is, and they're not eligible to take the bus. And so I'm a little concerned about that with an increase. So that's what's going on in my head, trying to figure out, have you decreased routes and we're paying 30 million? Can I just say, Mr. Chair, Mamma Mia? Do we have the amount of what it was last year?
Yes.
And I apologize. I have these
So,
glasses, Mr. Chair, and they do not work.
so last year we were at 28,258,227.
Okay, and I know we said 8.75 increase, but it's always good to hear the number without having to calculate it. I may have more questions, Mr. Chair, but I'll yield back to you. Thank you.
I just want to add some things to that. When we contracted with CESO, our transportation consultant, one of the things that I had them do was a very deep market dive to find out what kind of increases other districts were looking at in the state of Connecticut and then nationally as well. There is, just like there is with the teachers, there's a very dramatic bus driver shortage. And a few of the things that came out of what has made First Student successful in retaining their bus drivers is some of the programs that they put in place to retain them. And those programs have some cost as well. They put in some bonuses to be able to retain bus drivers that had a certain amount of years within New Haven. There's been a significant push to obtain New Haven residents as drivers and provide them with the necessary training and everything that they need to be able to become drivers for New Haven. Also, as CESO completed their analysis, more than half of the contracts that they worked with in the last 12 months have had double-digit percentage increases, 10, 12, 15%. For us to be at 8% is significant.
That's very helpful to hear, and thank you again. Thank you for the information that you've given us. I think that as part of this committee, Mr. Chair, I may say, not only are we looking to approve a one-year contract of this amount of money, but I feel we're also tasked with making sure that all of our students have the best transportation possible, because we have a lot of kids that take that bus.
Absolutely.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Farrell. I see next on the agenda, the queue is Alder Douglas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your presentation. Just two questions. How long has First Student been active, been contracted to the city of New Haven?
When I started to look at this, I believe, I want to say somewhere between 15 years, somewhere around that.
And in that time, have we been approached by any other contractors, bus companies that?
So one of the charges that I gave to CESO Group when they came to develop the RFP was to create competition. We wanted to see other opportunity for bus companies to be able to come in to the city and provide services, because there hasn't been historically that competition. Not only does that provide a more competitive market, it provides better service. When you have some level of competition between vendors. And the decision was made by myself, Attorney Lesiatis, CESO Group, purchasing, and Michael Gormley to segment the contract into two separate, smaller contracts. One being for all regular education transportation, and one being for all special education transportation. Yes, the contract is segmented like that now. However, the segments that are now are much smaller. So you have our regular education special education contract that we have before you tonight is almost 80% of the total routes. So in what we put forward in the RFP was almost a 2/3, 1/3 split. So it was a significant deviation from where we currently are. One of the obstacles that we have with segmenting our system is New Haven has a very complex routing structure because of the type of system we are with our magnet schools and not having the neighborhood schools to be able to have a route structure that accommodates splitting it more evenly. And the split that was put out in the RFP was the one that made the most sense, given the dynamics of what our contract structure is. In the future, with our new transportation director, one of the things that we want to do is look at bringing our routing function into the district so that we can design our routes ourselves and be able to segment the contract more effectively to give us a better ability to be able to segment it further, to be able to provide competition that will allow smaller vendors to take on a more significant portion of the contract. I hope that answered your question.
Thank you.
Well answered. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Alder Douglas. I'm going to move to someone who's on the queue for the first time, which is Alder Santiago, and then we'll have Alder Morrison.
I got a question, maybe maybe to the chair. How much was the original cost? I know the board had rejected a 3-year program, right? How much was for the 3 years? Are we saving money? Are we?
From the 2-year from the 1-year extension to
For 3 years, how much it was?
I want to see, I don't have the exact number, but I believe that it was 90,000. I do not have that information with me, but I believe it was around 96 million for the 3 years.
96? So we're better off doing 3 years, 30 million. I just want to know how much it was to compare with 1 year.
It depended upon a couple of different things. It depended upon whether we went with a fully first student contract or if we segmented between first student and another vendor. Each of them had a slightly different cost, and the interpretation of that by the board was different.
Okay, I just wanted to know how much the 3 years compared to 1 year.
Well, if I may, Elias Alexiadis, Mr. Chairman and Alder Santiago, we had proposals from responses to the RFP from 3 different companies, and none were awarded. So it's hard to answer your question to compare what might have been, depending on which was awarded, to what we have now before us.
I understand that, but the reason I asked, because if the 3 years were like, let's say 75 million, so we were better off doing the 3 years instead of doing 1 year. I just wanted to compare the 3 years versus the 1 year, the comparison. I just wanted to know if it makes sense to do 1 year instead of 3 years.
I think we'd rather be here.
Yeah.
I would much rather be here with a 3-year agreement than.
But that was not the decision of the board.
Well, thank you. I just wanted to know. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Santiago. Alder Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Liam, I just had a question in regards to timeframes when we start looking at these kind of contracts. Does your office have the ability to say, 18 months prior to a contract about to expire, can your office come to the Board of Education to say, look, in 18 months or 12 months, this contract is gonna expire. We need to start this early work. Because I find, and not just with the Board of Ed, but a lot of departments, they wait till the year of when things are about to expire. And I think subconsciously folks just feeling like, okay, this will just go its normal process. But looking at this whole process, it didn't go that way. And so now we're in a position where the board could not agree to anything. And we're in a position, as you know, to follow up what Alder Santiago said, we're basically paying more because we're in a position where we need this company to do us a solid and give us one more year. But if we're the company too, you're gonna have to pay for that. Because if you went into a 3-year agreement with me, it might not be an increase of 8 point something. It might be an increase of 4 point something. But because we didn't start this process early on, and again, I wanted to know, does your office have the ability to bring not just this contract, but any contract to the Board of Ed to say, we need to start this process now. So just in case things don't work out, we still have time. And then, you know, it all goes back to the dollar. It doesn't cost us as much.
Yes, we do. Now anyway, even before. That's part of the reason this contract, we started the process in November of 22. No one would have thought that we would be where we are now.
Right. And so I'm just, for me, just looking at government, right? Anytime you gotta ask 1,000 people, can we do? You gotta add that. It's like building, you know, developer building a house. You gotta add that 6 months of the just in case. And so, like you said, you started November 2022, maybe starting April of 2022, that would at least started the conversation. And by November, you would have known, okay, doesn't look like this is gonna go that easy. So I'm glad to know that your office has the ability to take not just this contract, any contract, to say, let's look at this now so we can get ahead of it. Because again, it goes back down to the dollar. Because we are, not to say that, you know, because 6 months usually is appropriate, right? The government doesn't seem like they like.
As I've been here, I've learned certain contracts we need to look at far in advance, and this is definitely one of them. I would like to see some measure of a schedule within my office on certain things, just like we do with union contracts. We have a ticker that says we need to start these conversations X month, things out, or X amount of months away. The problem becomes vendors holding their pricing for that long. That's where, especially with the larger contracts that are more complex with labor, with leases that they have to obtain, sometimes being that far out is just as much, they're guessing just as much as we are. And they make us significantly higher than we would like them to. So I think that it's a very delicate balance of ensuring that we're doing it timely, but also being knowledgeable enough about what the scope of what we're looking at is to be able to say, this is the appropriate period of time to allow that vendor or that contractor to be able to develop real sound pricing instead of being so far out that they have to guess.
Okay, all right, well, again, I'm glad to know that, you know, there's someone holding the calendar now to say that, you know, this little 6 months probably, because it's huge, right? But that the whole balance in regards to cost. But at least if the conversation is started, you at least get kind of a feel like, okay, they might not like this company anymore, or yeah, this is still a good fit. So thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Alder Morrison. I saw Alder Fairlow get back on the queue. But before he begins, let me just see if there's anybody who hasn't gotten in the queue yet who'd like to get on the queue first. Seeing none, Alder Fairlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I started before to say that this is a little confusing to me. It's because we're doing 1 year instead of a multi-year contract. But I just didn't want to go too deep into that because you're doing such a good presentation. I didn't want to ruin it. But
That's okay.
What happens And I know the answer, I just think we need to have that discussion if we reject this contract. I feel like we're between a rock and a hard place. And so we're told this late in the game, we got to get these kids to school. Board of Alders, if you say no, shame on you. You're telling us that it's an 8.75% increase, which is better than what you're seeing across Connecticut. What is going to happen in 24? We're looking at possibly double digits. My colleague mentioned, the 3-year, we would have, of course, we're going to have a savings if we do a 3-year contract. We have no idea what's going to happen if we do 1 year or 2 years. And so if we say no to this, what is the district's option? Will they go month to month?
So I had this conversation with the superintendent because I predicted this question to come. And one of the things that this would be a conversation with the leadership of the district on whether or not to provide transportation for summer school. And that would be something that the leadership team would have to decide as a group on how to proceed without a transportation contract in place. That's not a question that I could really have an answer to myself because of the impact is so substantial. It's something that they would have to respond to as a team with input from myself, Attorney Lexiatis, and city purchasing on what next.
So it ended up being a shame on you on the Board of Alders for not providing transportation for summer school. We're putting such an emphasis on the importance of educating our children, rather than placing the emphasis on a shame on you on the Board of Ed for not being able to pull themselves together and present a contract that makes sense, which is a multi-term contract, which we've always done. Just need to make that statement.
I understand.
I probably should have done it during discussion. My apologies to Mr. Chair for being vocal on that issue. I yield that to you, sir.
Thank you, Alder Furlow. Further questions from colleagues on this item? Seeing none, I'll ask if there's a member of the public who wishes to testify on this item. And the second time, is there a member of the public here who wishes to testify on this item? And for a third time, is there a member of the public here who wishes to testify on this item? Please come forward. Seeing none, we thank you for your time and you are excused. Well, before you go, my understanding is that the district would love to see this move as quickly as possible.
Yes.
Right. And the way that we would do that, if we decided to do that, would be to leave it in the committee and ask the full board to discharge it at its next meeting in early July. So to do that, we would take no action on this item this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone, for your time. I really appreciate you this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Alder.
We will now go back to item 3, which we skipped so that one of the makers could join us. She is here. Let us see. We are joined by our Deputy Chief Administrative Officer. Please give us your name and address for the record.
Rebecca Bombero, 122 West Rock Avenue, Wheaton, Connecticut. I thank you for your patience while I'm not down here, stretched a little thin right now. I'm here today to present the item for a 3-year lease agreement for used golf carts at Amen Memorial Golf Course. As you guys probably remember, the golf course is self-sustaining, so it's paid for by the enterprise fund. The golf carts themselves are paid for by a charge to the users of the golf carts. We did a competitive bid for the lease of used carts, because the question came up before. Timing is important because the inventory of used cars is not static. So we received 2 bids. In both instances, we received proposals for 1-year and 3-year options. The 3-year options are far favorable because you're paying for the cost of carts over 3 years as opposed to 1. Both agreements include the maintenance of the carts. It can be terminated at any year of the lease agreement by returning the carts. And we selected New England Golf Carts, which would provide us 75 used units. They're actually the current vendor that provided the carts at the course now. So there will be absolutely no interruption in service because they will take back our old leased cars when they deliver the new cars. The current lease does expire at the end of July. So we're hoping to execute this for August. And the cost is $65,000 per year of the agreement. I'm happy to answer any questions. One other thing, because this is a financing agreement through Yamaha Motor Corporation, it does include an indemnity clause. So we're requesting permission for the indemnity language to be included. So any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you for that very succinct presentation. Deputy CAO and acting head of Parks and Public Works. Maybe there's some other job that the city's going to give you before the meeting's over. But tonight you just guest star at the Finance Committee meeting. Questions from colleagues about the golf carts agreement? Questions from colleagues? I have a couple. One is, tell us more about the indemnity agreement, what it is and why it's in place.
So standard city language includes that the vendor indemnifies and holds harmless the city of New Haven because the vendor in this instance is a financing corporation. They would not do that language. We actually execute the finance agreement that they provide us rather than the standard city contract, which has been reviewed by council.
I guess I'm just still thinking through, indemnify us against what? Against like not paying or against like somebody getting hurt on one of these golf carts? What are we being held harmless for?
So the standard city contract language includes an indemnity clause. I don't know exactly what the indemnity clause would cover in this instance, but the city would be indemnifying Yamaha against any, lawsuits that went their way instead of ours.
We'll be indemnifying them.
Correct.
Because they're, I see, because they're, okay. I think it'd be good just to have that language.
It was included in your packet?
Well, it's not in this particular packet, but
Okay.
I'll look for it.
I will make sure you guys get another digital copy of that.
Yes.
But the same release was included.
I would just like to see the lease. I don't see it, but it'd be good to look at it. All right, that's my question about indemnity. Further questions from colleagues about this golf cart lease agreement? 3 years. I have one more. These are gas-powered golf carts.
Correct.
Did you look into alternate methods of propulsion?
We are not yet ready with the infrastructure out at the golf course because we are still in construction. It is definitely something we are looking towards in the future. And one of the reasons that the ability to break this lease is an important feature of the 3-year contract. We do anticipate moving to alternate powered carts soon after completion of the renovations out there. Storage is an issue during construction.
Yes. So the city has the ability to opt out of this anytime?
Correct. There's notice provisions. It would be like leasing a car through a dealership. At any time you can return the car and break your lease.
Gotcha. Further questions from colleagues about this agreement? Alder Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You said gas power, natural gas or liquid gas?
I will have to get back to you on that. I'm 90% sure it's regular gasoline, but I want to be certain.
There's a lot of them use propane gas, possibly.
If you could follow up to me, we'd be most grateful for that clarification. Thank you. Further questions from colleagues?
Just respectfully request, as you mentioned on the other item, a discharge from committee would allow us the time to execute the documents before the August delivery date, because your meeting in August would be slightly thereafter.
Understood. We've heard your request. Further questions from colleagues? Is there a member of the public who would wish to testify on this item? Is there a member of the public, or any public who would wish to testify on this item? Is there a member of the public who would wish to come forward and testify on this item? Seeing none, we're going to move on to our final items. The monthly budgetary and financial report for the months of March and April. Mr. Gormley, the floor is yours. And I see that you have paper for us, so let's take a moment to distribute that.
Thank you. Michael Gormley, City Acting Controller, 45 Jefferson Road, Branford, Connecticut. All right. Thank you, everyone. So I'll be brief, respectful of everyone's time. What you have before you is the April 2023 monthly financial report. I'll just briefly highlight some of the areas in the monthly report. We've heard some of these already in the last couple of months, so I'll just go over a few of the changes. As you can see, based on the front page, for the general fund, which is the city's main operating account, we are forecasting as of April an $8 million surplus within general fund. So what that would do is that would add on to the city's fund balance at the end of the year if the numbers were to continue to trend in the way that we are showing in the April 2023 monthly report. Moving on to page number page 4, I would just briefly go over some of these revenues. Again, some of the information really hasn't changed over what you've heard over the previous monthlies. Starting on page number 4 is really just a high-level overview of where we are when you roll up the city's different revenue sources, such as property taxes, license permits and fees, which include some of our building permits and TT&P revenue. Our city's investment income, which is the money in the interest that we earn over short-term investments and interest on our bank accounts, rent and fines, payments in lieu of taxes, and some other revenue sources. And then the second line is really where we're looking at for our state education, our state grants, which include education, which is primarily made up of education cost sharing, and other state grants such as pilot, PWAP, and other revenue sources. So looking at page 5, the next few pages are really the revenue that I'll briefly go through, which kind of just are the granular detail of what's on page 4. Property taxes, we're looking at projecting about $4 million ahead of budget. A lot of this is really our delinquent taxes. As you can see, we're about $2.2 million ahead in that budget. We do conservatively budget in delinquent taxes because, again, that's a balance that goes up and down in any year, right? The more people pay on delinquents, the balance goes down. In the next year, sometimes accounts are added, but it may not be the same amount that came off. So it's really a balancing act, which is why we conservatively budget in that account. But we have seen increased collections in delinquent accounts from normal and interest and penalties. The current taxes are really doing well as we did see an increase in real estate and personal property. We are forecasting that. We did see, which I am actually looking into, we did start to see a slow decline in motor vehicle taxes. So I am looking at with the assessor's office to see if we can exactly pinpoint that. Remember, we do not, as a city, assess the value of vehicles, right? That is done by the NADA, which is the national standard. So again, we're looking at why we think we are not going to meet budget on that particular account. So hopefully when I present the next monthly report, I can have an overview or answer on that particular area. But overall, we are doing well on the tax budget. And as of the month of April, seeing about $4 million ahead. Again, on the state grant side, we are looking at collecting everything that was budgeted in the state of Connecticut adopted budget. We are looking at about $1.7 million ahead of budget in state grants. Again, as I mentioned at previous meetings, that's primarily because of that municipal revenue sharing account, which was $1.4 million that the city was not expecting to receive, but did receive based on a formula from the state when they reconciled the previous year's municipal revenue sharing account. Going on to page number 7, license permits and fees. Again, in this budget, we really have 2 large areas that are local revenues, building permits, which as you can see, as of the month of April, we were already at $15.5 million. So anything that we get in from May and June really does contribute to that surplus because we're already ahead of budget for that particular category. Sorry, I lost my place. TT&P meter receipts, we are right there on budget. We are forecasting to meet budget for that particular area with meter receipts. We have continued to see parking and meters, parking at meters throughout downtown and just in the overall greater New Haven area. So that will certainly meet budget. We're projecting to meet budget for this year. Interest income, again, is short-term investments that we see on our city's bank balances. We've really bounced back since COVID on short-term investments. During that period, they were really down, which is why, we started adjusting that budget. I'm working with the financial advisors to see if that trend, what we think that if that trend is going to continue related to short-term investments, but it was certainly a welcome sight to see that we're already at $4.1 million for this year as of April for that particular category. When the last few years we've been in a couple of hundreds of thousands of dollars there. The next major category that I'll just briefly go over is parking tags. That's an area that we're currently working with TT&P on. That one is projected to be really down in from the budget by about $2.3 million. We have seen a decline in the number of citations. We did have vacancies throughout the year. We are looking at about 1 vacancy at least per month for that particular category in full-time and 1 vacancy in part-time. So again, with those budgeted positions being vacant, that does have an impact on the revenue that we're collecting for the city. But that's an area that we're going to work on with transportation, traffic, and parking. Again, especially going into next fiscal year. And then, that's going to be one of the budgetary items that we look at as we continue to work on the 5-year plan with our financial consultants to see if we need to adjust that number in future fiscal years. And I am just going to go on to page number 9, which is really at the bottom of the page. We'll show you, once you roll up all these categories, we are looking at being ahead on the budgetary side by about $4.8 million. Again, as I mentioned, we did budget $5 million in ARPA funds that we are not planning on using this fiscal year as revenue replacement. On the expense side, which starts on page 11, we do a roll-up of some of our major departments. The one I'll mention on page 11 is really police department. Again, with the police department, we've had a number of vacancies throughout the year, which have really been filled based on an overtime basis. So that's why when you look at the FY 2023 projected number, we are looking at $5.1 million in the police department salary line as savings, but you'll see that that's offset by $3.9 million overage and overtime. Again, that's, we do work with the chief in looking at overtime, but again, obviously, public safety is always first. So we did have enough in salary savings to offset the projected overtime. And even with the additional overtime, there's still a projected surplus within that department of about $1.3 million. On the next page, just looking at fire department, the fire department is the same situation. While they have not had as many vacancies throughout the year within the police department, we did see an increase in overtime in fire services as well. But we are projecting enough in salary savings to offset the overage and overtime as well. So even with the excess overtime, we're looking at about a surplus of $1 million within the fire department. A lot of the health, youth, and recreation and parks and public works, those really are savings are really due to vacancies. Each of those departments have seen vacancies within the year that have contributed to the savings. The health department primarily, we've had nurses, and even though we've settled the contract, we're still recruiting for new nurses at the new rates as well. Youth and rec, we've had a few different positions vacant during the fiscal year, and the same with parks and public works. Parks and public works has had vacancies, but a lot of that has been driven by overtime. And again, that $1 million that you see in parks and public works under non-personnel, this committee heard a transfer for, this committee heard a transfer related to the transfer station. So that's what that is. This is really the number before that transfer was applied, what we were projecting in parks and public works for non-personnel. Page 13 really just gives an overview and summary of all the city departments. As you can see, we are looking at about a surplus in most of the city departments. Again, we've had a lot of vacancies throughout the city this year. Human resources is certainly recruiting and doing recruitment and retention. I think, while a lot of these services have been filled on overtime, we would certainly love to have more bodies instead of overtime. I think that alleviates a lot of pressure on city employees. But, this year we are seeing a lot of savings in departments, primarily through vacancy savings. On this page, you'll notice the Board of Education. We're working with their Chief Financial Officer on their projections. As of April, they were projecting $3.9 million deficit within their department. So that's something that we certainly continue to monitor as well. With the Board of Ed, the expectation or hope is that they can certainly erase as much of that deficit as possible. The only area that I would highlight on this page that may affect the surplus is contract reserve, which is kind of in the middle of the page. We are projecting to use the $4 million, but, as contracts have come through this committee, I mentioned, to look at the contracts, there may have been some additional costs that would go in that contract reserve number as well, possibly beyond the $4 million. But not significantly. So the next few pages are really just, page 14 is a roll-up of some of our areas such as debt service, subsidies, pension, self-insurance, and medical. So that just highlights some of the numbers that you've seen on the previous page. Page 15 is really the other area that really affects the city's budget. This is our medical costs. So claims have been up and down this year, primarily down in the first half of the year, but we did start to see some increase in medical claims during the year. We did see an increase in March of about $2 million. We did have a few claims that came in. and we did see an increase in February. And for the month of April, we were almost there. We did see a slight increase of about 3.2% when you compare year over year. So we'll continue to monitor the rest of the year. For example, I can tell you as a preview, in the next monthly, we are actually down in the month of May for claims, from a claims standpoint. So, again, this is one of those areas that really fluctuates, during the year, and it really depends on the claim experience that we see. From an overall total claims perspective, we are projecting about $125.4 million, which is about $2.9 million less than the previous year from a total expense on the medical fund. And then when you go to the last page, page 16, that really outlines the revenue section, which is really employee cost share, grant revenue, and other revenues that come to the medical fund. And then you add in our food service account, which we pay for their claims for cafeteria and other workers, so they actually contribute something to this medical account, and then our prescription rebate as well. The biggest driver of the revenue for medical is the general fund, which on this page you'll see we're projecting at about $90.1 million for the fiscal year. So overall, the revenue would be about $127.4 million. When you compare the revenues to the expenses, that would leave about a $2 million surplus. That will leave about a $2 million net operating surplus, which would increase the net fund position of this medical account. So when you take into account the $2 million for medical and then the $8 million for for general fund, you will look at about a overall operating surplus of about $10 million as of the month of April. What that would do is that would increase our fund balance from $37 million to $47 million. Remember, the fund balance is the accumulation of the net operating results at the end of the year. So this is where we've been trending for the month of April. One area I did forget to mention is on page 13, you will notice that we still have committed purchase orders. A lot of times I get the question of, especially during towards the last monthly, why does the number fluctuate, right? And a lot of times you'll see that we still have $52.1 million in committed purchase orders and services. If any of those committed services or purchase orders are not used, that will increase the surplus that we would see in the year. So that's really where some of the savings, so when you see a fluctuation, especially in the last quarter of the monthly reports in the surplus, or if you're running a deficit, whatever the case is, a lot of the times this is where we see the savings from. My office, and other offices in the Department of Finance, work with different offices to see is there any money we can save off of these committed purchase orders to contribute to the overall bottom line. So again, as of April, we really had $52.1 million of committed purchase orders. $40.6 million of that is the Board of Ed. Again, you're not going to save all of this. It's usually minimal savings. I believe we can usually get $1 million or $2 million in a good year off of this number, because a lot of this is contractual services, right? So busing contracts, tuition, leases, things like that. So we kind of scrub these to see if there's any additional savings that the city can utilize. So again, during this last quarter, you'll generally see a fluctuation within these monthly reports, and then we will submit the pre-audit report to this board to kind of go over where we think we're gonna end from an audit standpoint. So, Mr. Chair, with that, I believe that is my presentation, and I will open it up for questions.
Thank you, as always, Mr. Barney, for your presentation and for providing us figures to look at and to provide the narrative. We are just nearing the end of this current fiscal year. Usually there's a month or so, maybe 6 weeks lag between when the month actually ends and when we get the monthly financial report for that month. Do you see any reasons why the closeout of this particular fiscal year will proceed any differently than the closeouts we've had for other fiscal years?
No, I think, we're really looking at all circumstances that will arise during the fiscal year. Obviously, there are, something can swing something in the other direction, right? So, but from this standpoint, we're not really seeing any issues that may come up as to why we can't forecast numbers. There are different areas that we're looking at related to, litigation or Board of Ed or other numbers that may affect this number. But from my standpoint, I think, once certain decisions are made in the upcoming weeks, we can certainly still be on track to provide the monthlies and accurate financial information like we have in the past.
Thank you for that. We'll now have questions from colleagues on these monthly financial reports. Alderman Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So thank you, Mr. Gormley, for your presentation. It was very helpful. One of the questions that I have is in regards to these vacancy savings. And so looking at that, and then I believe, I'm not 100% sure, but HR is under one of your departments, as you hold 2 roles, I think. I'm not sure about that.
I work in conjunction with HR, but they report to the CAO.
Okay, CAO. So, but with working with them, are there any kind of plans, anything, in place to speak to how can we get bodies into these positions? Because we see these savings like, yeah, but the work is not getting done, right? Because we don't have enough people. So my question is, has there been discussion with HR to, because I know one of the hardest pieces about municipality work is the civil service test. And, I know that they can look at waiving some things for a period of time, come up with some creative ideas to be able to get bodies into these roles, because by bodies not being into these roles, this has a domino effect on everything, just like our, the budget for next year just came up. Because there aren't bodies in these positions, different things that were looked at weren't able to happen because we don't have the people. So I just want to know, what are we doing to help that?
Yeah, no, that's a great statement and great question, Alderman Morrison. I think one of the things we committed to during the budget process with the chair is to have human resources come back to this committee to kind of talk about that exact question. The great thing is that we've hired a new human resource director, 5 months ago, right? And she has really she was here during the budget presentation. She's kind of taken a look at that civil service process and asked a lot of questions with that process, because it can be a burdensome process, especially in today's climate. It's really an employee market. People are not going to wait 2 months to hear from the city of New Haven just to take a test, not even to get an interview, just to take a test. So our HR director has certainly taken a look at the civil service rules, because that's really what governs our hiring. And I know she's had a few ideas on how to streamline hiring, as far as how scoring of tests go, doing what we call credential reviews, which is really looking at the application and the person's qualifications. So I think she can give you a more detailed presentation. I'm happy to bring your question back to her and schedule, the meeting for this committee. But I can assure you, she realizes in just being from the private sector and coming into government, how things are working here and knowing that certain things need to change, especially so we can get the bodies in. Because when we have these amount of vacancies, work's getting done, but it can also take a toll on city employees, right? Because we're asking them to do more. Yes, we're paying them overtime, but you gotta have that work-life balance, right? And I think that's important for employees. So there's a lot that HR is thinking about right now and how we can, especially having so many vacancies, how we can get bodies into those vacancies in an expedited manner while staying within the civil service rules.
So thank you for that. Mr. Chair, through you, it would be awesome if we could have the HR director or someone come to talk about that, because it really has an impact on everything that we're doing as a city financially.
So noted.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Parney. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Morrison. Further questions from colleagues of our acting controller and manager of budget about these monthly financial reports? No. I want to thank you for your presentation, Mr. Gormley, and I'm so glad that we have a healthy, positive fund balance, because we know that there are some big bills that we have coming up that we need to pay.
Thank you.
Any member of the public wishing to testify on these monthly financial reports, now is the time. Is there, for a second time, is there a member of the public who wishes to testify on either of these two items or any of the other items we've dealt with this evening? And for a third time, is there a member of the public wishing to testify on these items? Seeing none, Alder Santiago.
I move that we close the public section.
Second.
A motion's been made to close the public portion of this meeting. Any discussion of the motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. The motion carries. The public portion is closed. I will just note for the record that we heard requests from the administration, the makers of items 1, 2, 3, and 4. They wish for those items to be voted on as quickly as possible by the full board. And of course, the way that we can allow that to happen is to take no action this evening, but instead for me as chair to request, send a letter to the president of the board asking that the full board discharge it in our first meeting in July for immediate action. Unless I hear any objection, that would be my intention to make that request for items 1 through 4. Seeing no objection, let's move on to item 5 and 6.
I move that we will file 5 and 6.
Second.
A motion's been made to recommend that item 5 and 6 be read and filed. Any discussion of that motion? Seeing none, all in favor of that motion, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, say nay. Motion carries. And before a motion to adjourn is appropriate, I just want to let colleagues know that it's my hope to be able to provide a little bit of rest for our hardworking finance committee members, either in July or in August, but I am not certain yet if that will be possible because items keep coming to us. And there are big items that we have to finish, such as the management, employee, and executive, the executive management and confidential employees manual. There's an ordinance amendment to the purchasing ordinance, which is rather important. And there are other, there's the land bank ordinance, which is also a financial ordinance. So those are important items that we need to do this summer. So I'll be working with my co-chair, my vice chair, and with city staff to plan out these next couple of meetings. And if there's an opportunity to take a little break, we will, but we may not be able to, given just the volume and importance of the items coming before us. We'll do our best. And if you have any questions or concerns about that, just let me know. A motion is appropriate.
So moved.
Sure. Which motion are you moving?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
The motion has been made to adjourn. It's been seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. The motion